Are revolutions fundamentally against the ancien regime of our parents? Shocking the elders with a red star, piercing, or tattoo, or loud rock music? Revolutions require the energy of the young, but are today's student youth misguided, naive, brainwashed by woke ideology, or simply misunderstood? Rebels with a cause. So join me, Jan Darasz, for How We Got Here.
Celebrations this week at Yale University as hundreds of students mark the end of their studies. Some, though, seized the opportunity to continue their protests against Israel's military operations in Gaza, with a number walking out of the graduation event and others wearing red gloves to symbolize bloodied hands. College campuses across America were shaken in April by unrest that resulted in clashes with police and classroom shutdowns. Their actions sparked copycat demos across the world, from Paris's prestigious Sorbonne University to Sydney in Australia. In Poland, thousands wrote letters to university authorities calling on them to end cooperation with Israeli institutions. But student protests are nothing new. Here, undergraduates marched through a wet Bonn in then West Germany in 1960 to protest against a farm collectivization drive in East Germany. Students in South Africa protest over the detention of undergraduates and academics suspected of being enemies of the state. The May '68 Paris protest had roots in student sit-ins about social issues. They spread, eventually paralysing the French economy. But what do people think about these modern-day protests? Not much, apparently. According to YouGov, Americans are more likely to strongly or somewhat oppose the demos, while only 28% support the pro-Palestinian protesters. The 2,000-plus arrests generated headlines around the world, with scenes of police dragging off students. It's worth noting that half of Americans aged 45 or older believe university authorities hadn't been harsh enough when trying to clear the campuses.
Our guest today is sociologist Filip Pazderski from the Institute of Public Affairs. Welcome to the programme. Great to have you.
Hello.
When you look at this scene of the student protests, certainly in Western capitals, a bit in Poland, what do you make of the mechanism of student protest, a cause to fight for? This seems to be a repetition of many phenomena that we can see in history, 20th century.
I would, for the starters, I would claim that quite often the young generation is the one that is supposed to, and it's taking this opportunity to fight with the current established situation, and this is also related to their aim to fight for their place in the world. It's sometimes connected to the need to push a bit older people, maybe a bit. I'm not telling that totally. I mean, it differs from time to time, of course, as we know.
Shock the parents.
As well, yes. This is also related to fighting with the parents, so with this intergenerational conflicts and discussions. And this also should be the young generation, and they are also expected to actually to show their disapproval with the way how the world looks like and with the direction the world is heading to. In our history, young people were using different means to show their disapproval, disappointment. With that, also depending on the surrounding situation, on the circumstances they were living in, whether it was in the, French Revolution or like within the 19th century and afterwards, like the most famous student protests were in Europe and also beyond, were in 1968, as we know.
What's is it a feature? Is this a feature of the young and the educated and the middle classes, as you see today? Ivy League students making alliances with Islamists and all sorts of other groups. Is this an experiment, or do these things tend to lead to concrete results? How do you see that?
So I would say that It also depends on the cause and depends on the possibilities. Because yes, I mean for sure, the young, more educated people from the middle class, that most of them goes to the universities. They might be more vocal. They have this cultural capital that helps them to organize themselves. They know how to do this. They can more easily reach out to media or
Yes.
organize themselves, and then get some attention and also then within the media as well. But especially these days, since sometimes the means of being vocal are very simple, much more easier and much more accessible to also different social groups. And especially the young people, and this also refers to the research that I was doing at the Institute of Public Affairs, where I work. It shows that actually these days, also in Poland, but not only, it's also beyond, young people are actually much more active in the online sphere, which is natural part of their lives. It is also easier to write something on your
Yes.
laptop or even smartphone, or like click that you like something and then support the cause in that way, or even take part in the fundraiser to support the cause that you are interested with. And young people are doing this much more often than the older ones. But it also gives a space and opportunity to people that are less educated, not necessarily coming from the middle class, to show their disapproval, disappointment with the state of affairs of the particular society or of the country, and they are doing that. So definitely, I mean, the protests that we observe at the universities around the world, also in Poland, last days, they are definitely this means of activity that is much more often used by those better educated people. Yeah, but the working class is also taking part in the manifestations, as we know. We had the farmers' protests. I'm sure there were a lot of younger farmers taking part in that.
Well, was there student support for the farmers, for example, and vice versa? I mean, for example, as we were talking earlier about the 1968 student protests here in Warsaw, there was friction between the classes at that point, wasn't there?
To some extent it was also incentivized by the ruling party back then, like the Communist Party, because they were using the working class against the so-called intelligentsia, so the middle class back then, we can say so. But also, like, I mean, we know that right after actually this student protest in Poland in 1968, they started the wave of protest manifestations that also reached out to the working class. In 1970, like 2 years after, we already have big manifestations that were organized by the working class, and in some of the cities related to the coal mines, especially. And then the next waves went after that as well. So quite often it's interlinked. When it comes to the farmers' protest and young people and the students, I think it would be difficult to find some kind of like common lines outside the general disapproval with the situation, because the farmers' protests are most related to the cause that is very important for the young people, and including the students the most, like the climate change, fighting the climate change and the Green Deal, because the farmers are actually manifesting against that.
Yeah. What's if we can continue the 1968 theme, great protest in France or in Paris. Was there a similar bridging of the gap between classes and generations in Paris, or was this purely a student demonstration then?
No, as far as I know, and this is also main difference between what have happened in Western Europe, because it was not only in Paris, France, many other countries of the Western Europe as well, and Poland and Eastern Bloc, so-called back then, is that like, whereas in Western Europe it was mostly related to this generational gap, the fight between the younger generation with more conservative, like closed society that was built after the war by their parents, mostly, and then they wanted to have more freedom, more space, more rights, and so on. Whereas in Poland, yes, it was also related to the rights, but I would say much more basic rights related to the civic rights, and it was really fighting with the communistic regime and their politics, and it was also partially related to the economical situation that was, causing much more troubles to the large part of the society.
Yes. I suppose you can say also the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, for example. Depending on the context, your social context, are student protests a luxury or a necessity, I suppose?
Definitely. But we have to also consider that I mean, depending on the country, the students also are coming from different social classes, social groups as well. Not necessarily they are only from the middle class, especially in the countries with more, let's say, socially oriented system that supports people from other social classes entering the higher education as well, like Italy or Spain. Yes. And so on. Then you will find at the universities also more people coming from the lower social backgrounds as well, and they are, with the education there are also, and expectations are growing, but they are also bringing their causes from the social classes. So this is, you can also see it, and definitely the local context of the local society and culture and the tradition of protest as well is very important.
Let's go back to your findings, your researches in this field. What are the other main findings that you've discovered? You say that there's a growing use of social media and the internet to voice protest. How do you see, for example, this developing? You see the more people from former working class background. What are the other main findings that you seem to have discovered?
So the latest research that we have done a couple of months ago already, but I think the findings are still valid for sure. I mean, there are plenty interesting things. When it comes to the youngest people, so the people aged 18, 29, so the youngest voters, first of all, something that is interesting that we find out is that the kind of recognition of the role of democracy is falling down or has been falling down over the last years.
So it's not translated into support for political parties? Established political parties.
This is also related to their feeling of disengagement and dropping lack of interest in political life. It is still quite high, I would say, also in comparison with other countries in the region, in the Central Eastern Europe, but it's dropping down over the last years. But in the same time, so as I said, young people are claiming that democracy, okay, I mean, the majority says that it's good, it's very good regime, the rule of, a way of ruling the country, but this support is dropping down. But in the same time, what is also decreasing is the number of people that are ready to sacrifice their freedoms and rights in exchange of security, in exchange of better life quality, and some other issues. So I would say that in this research you can see the results of the last years of our politics, where the democracy was, I mean, according to most of the commentators and general evaluation of the Western of the international institutions, the quality of democracy was decreasing, especially when it comes to the rule of law and so on. And this was related to the way how young people were perceiving them. So they didn't like the democracy in the country. They didn't like how the politicians from different political groups behave, that they are not listening to them, they are not providing their politics to them. But at the same time, while fighting for their rights during several waves of protests also that we have over the last years, in few of them, young people played important role. They learned that it's very important to hold your civic rights and to fight for them. So we have this strange situation.
Are people from my generation, for example, misunderstanding the youth of today? Then, the final question, we tend to be very condescending to how they organise their protests and what beliefs they make, and not acknowledging the fact that this is a different class of people who have different priorities, a different worldview. How do you see that, given that you have this disillusion with established politics, how are the tensions going to resolve themselves in the near future, do you think?
I think it's quite traditional way also of thinking, and it's also about me, because I'm also not that young. Maybe I would look a bit better than I am, but nevertheless, it's quite usual that the older generations tend to look on the younger people in a bit more stereotypical way.
Yes.
Like, I mean, sometimes thinking about them as being a bit childish, not this, or at least not this serious as much. Whereas actually I would claim that in most of the situations, most of the cases, young people are fighting for the same issues, causes that we, or our generations, yours, mine, were also fighting some time before. They just quite often use different language or refer to different issues because they are just important for them at the moment, and they also use obviously different means because the reality have changed, the possibility have changed. Now the online sphere is playing an important, crucial role in our lives as well, and it's even more for the young people. And because of that, also in the research you asked me about, we can see that for the young people now, the most important and most common means of public engagement is through online means of communication, by showing their protest, by supporting their causes, by speaking loudly about what they think. For them, it's natural, and probably for some members of the older generations, it can be difficult to understand. Yes. Why they are not going to the streets, for example.
I mean, will this change, last question to you, will this change politics, do you think, this online political world?
I think it already has changed. We already see that, I mean, the online communication plays a crucial and very important role for all the political actors. They are spending much more and more also money for that, for the political campaigning, for political advertising. It is also changing the way how we are communicating and how we are thinking, because we know that the online communication is much more different than it was before through, I mean, traditional media. I'm not telling that it's worse or bad, it's just different. We have this change, as we know, over the ages already, quite a few of them. We have to learn, all of us, how to find our places in this new reality.
How to manage change. Filip Pazderski, thanks for coming on to the programme.
Thank you very much.
It's great to have you. That's all we have time for today. Join us next time for How We Got Here.